Hello, and welcome to another AIS webinar. I'm John Green. I head up marketing and communications here at AIS. With the insurance industry still experiencing a talent gap, companies have been forced to consider new and creative ways to attract and retain qualified staff. In fact, many of our members have expressed the challenge they face in recruiting, especially in a post-COVID work environment. Here today to discuss acquiring talent and leading a team in a virtual world are leaders from two of our valued AIS partners. First, we have Rick Morgan, Chief Marketing Officer from WAHVE, also known as Work From Home Vintage Experts. He's a leading marketing and branding expert and was named by the Insurance Media Association as one of the 100 most powerful people in insurance in North America. Rick, welcome.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Well, same here. We're also, we have with us today is Carl Newman, President and CEO of WSRB and Building Metrics, Inc. WSRB is an independent, not-for-profit public service organization assisting insurers in Washington State. Building Metrics is their wholly owned subsidiary providing objective data on multiple risk factors across the country. Carl has been in the industry over more than 25 years. He's an international speaker, trainer, and coach certified by Maxwell Leadership. Carl, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rick. Looking forward to today.
Okay, great. So AIS was fortunate to have already converted to a distributed workforce years before the start of the pandemic. But we saw many companies struggle to manage their staff when they were forced to work from home. A lot of employers are now faced with a decision, whether to stay remote, bring employees back to the office, or some hybrid work environment. Tough to do when your employees get accustomed to working from home. Rick, why don't we start by defining just what are the options for the new working environment that employers and employees are facing these days?
Yeah, so I think there's three. First of all, there's the traditional in-office model that has been around forever, and I think it's still here. And then we've got the fully virtual, which actually the three companies represented on this panel are in that category for the most part. And then there's the hybrid, and I think the hybrid is what probably most of our listeners or people on the webinar today will be faced with. And I think the interesting thing about that is that it creates a new challenge. If you're 100% in person, we kind of know how to manage in that world. If you're 100% virtual, well, we learned how to do that during COVID. And now we've got this hybrid environment, which has got both, and it creates a whole new level and responsibility for managers, challenge, I guess I would say, for managers, and some new opportunities, which we'll discuss as we go through the webinar.
Carl, WSRB moved to a fully distributed workforce in just the last few years. How has the new environment worked since moving to fully remote? And what are some of the benefits and challenges of this shift in how WSRB is operating?
Thank you, John. And I got your name right this time. I am very grateful for Rick being on.
I was too. I'm not hurt.
Off to a great start. But here's the thing. When we look at people, whether they're virtual, whether it's hybrid, whether it's in office, people are people wherever you go. It's almost a Dr. Seuss kind of a statement. And when you're looking at having happy, motivated, productive team members, the biggest key is to hire motivated, positive people. And there's a fantastic resource I recommend. It's a book called Hiring for Attitude by Mark Murphy. And we use that as a playbook for how we do our interviews. And it's one of the key benefits is you're able to identify fairly quickly the problem solvers from the problem bringers. That's one one key thing that you get out of it, but there's a lot more to that. Because ultimately, as one of my mentors, John Maxwell, says, you can't motivate the unmotivated. You need to hire motivated people. We have this whole phenomenon now called quiet quitting. We don't really have room for that on our team, and you shouldn't either. So what you do is you hire motivated, positive people, give them a clear vision, mission, values to rally around, and then clear goals set out there with tools, training, and resources that give them the equipping that they need. Remove obstacles for them, hold them accountable for results, and reward them when they achieve those results. And so when you look at it that way, you're really in a position where I think you've got a greater shot at having a positive, motivated workforce because it's really about people, whether you're on Zoom or in the room. It's really about people when you talk about having a positive, motivated workforce.
You know, to just build on what Carl's saying, I think that one of the biggest trends we're going to see, and it's already started, and I don't see it slowing down, and it's important, and it's kind of an unusual shift, but we're seeing people now, our employers in particular, looking for skills rather than just positions. And so you've got your technical skills and your soft skills. And one of the things clearly that Carl's talking about is a soft skill. So that's, I think we're going to see a lot more of that as we really do struggle and are challenged to fill this talent gap.
Absolutely. And there's some benefits to the team members of not having to commute, but also there are challenges associated with that. You can't just drop by, you can't have the hallway conversations, you can't meet up, and that organic idea exchange doesn't happen like it used to. And so we put some things in place. Everybody's heard the UCLA study by Albert Mehrabian, the researcher who found that communication is 55% nonverbal, 38%. 38% of it is vocal, your vocal tone, and 7% is the words. And so one of the things we did right away was to say cameras on for everyone. You don't want just 7% of that coming through. And I know a lot of companies haven't done that. My son was, he's got a new gig now, but he was laid off from a tech company. And the first time he saw his supervisor's face was the day that he left the company after 2 years. And I said to him, hey, that might have been part of why you're getting laid off, son. So I think that's important. Just something as simple as that, but it's about relationships when it comes down to it.
Yeah, my son, in a similar situation, was hired just before COVID and met his boss a year later, and still has only met him twice. So it's a new world. But they are, his company is actually considering bringing people back, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I think that camera on thing is something that we learned early on too. WAHVE has been, in business for 13 years now. Our founder started it. She was an insurance broker in New York and realized there was this huge talent exodus as the baby boomers started retiring, and we were losing a lot of institutional knowledge. And at the same time, even 13 years ago, there was a talent challenge for insurance firms to find and keep experienced and knowledge talent. And so matching those two up became our business model. And early on, we realized that our own team, as we started communicating with each other, we absolutely needed to have our cameras on. It made a huge difference. And of course, I think the rest of the world learned a lot of these good tips and best practices that we've been doing all along. Once COVID hit, they found out what we've known for 13 years. So the camera on thing is important. Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah, Carl, at WSRB, you're in that war for talent, and how do you position this WSRB to attract the next generation of insurance professionals? These things, sometimes cameras on. These are the kinds of things you learn once you're in. But if you're recruiting, how do you expose that to people who they'd have to be working there to find out that that's your MO?
Yeah, we really promote the value of working in a positive, growth-oriented environment where people are valued and goals get done, goals get achieved, things get done. And so we believe that everyone is hardwired to be valued and valuable, right? And so when we create an environment where that happens, we have an interview process where typically the team that the person's joining has an opportunity to talk with them along with the other leaders. And the whole process works its way through where they get a chance to have contact points with everyone. And following Patrick Lencioni's advice from the book, The Advantage, I do the final cultural fit interview with every potential team member. We talk about who we are, what we do, how we do what we do. So they're walking in with an awareness of the kind of organization that they're joining. And they've heard from people throughout the interview process. By the time they get to me, they go, I've been hearing that. And that's what you want. You want them to have that. We can't, as an organization, pay top dollar, but there's something, and I even talk about it, there's an intangible dollar value for each person. Some people are mercenary, they want top dollar, they don't care what the work environment's like. But others are willing to give up just a little bit of money to have a great place to work. And so that starts with your organization's values, and it extends all the way to everything from the work environment to the compensation philosophy. You look at all those types of things, and they all are part of that.
I mean, it all becomes part of the corporate culture, right? I mean, let's talk a little bit about the corporate culture. So how important is it to match the needs of an organization for talent to the wants of the next generation of insurance professionals? What are they looking for, and how is it changing now, Rick?
Yeah, well, culture clearly is one of the key decision metrics that people use to find when they're either looking for work or once they're in a company, and how well they feel valued and how much they're able to contribute and be seen as important. But I think what employees are really looking for has shifted a little bit. I don't know that the items are so much different. Maybe the priority of those pieces are just a little different. So, for example, work-life balance is really high up on the list now, and I think again, COVID really was motivated that to become so important. I think people sat back and started really reevaluating what was important to them during the COVID pandemic, and so work-life balance is huge. I think other things are career advancement, and that's one of the things that is a real challenge. I think for people to feel that in fact they can advance if they're remote, or if they're hybrid. So I think it's incumbent on managers to make sure that they're giving a new employee or an existing employee an idea of that career path and how that will work, even if they're working remotely part of the time. And I have to just stop for a second. I've got a cold, and so my voice is going in and out, but so excuse me for that, those that are listening. But anyway, career advancement's huge. Job security is a big one, to make sure that they've got a place that they're going to be able to feel a part of and secure in that position. And then meaningful work. I don't think people anymore just want to show up. They want to be giving back and contributing. I think that's another key. But I think at the top is work-life balance, quite honestly.
Yeah, work culture is very important. It's very important here at AAIS, and I agree. I think we spend a lot of time and energy just making sure that our staff is got that work-life balance. Because it was funny when everyone started to go remote, people thought, oh, well, maybe I'll work less. I've heard people say I work more. I mean, I roll out of bed and now I'm working, as opposed to I got to commute to my job, right? So we got to spend a little more time thinking about that. Work culture has always been important, right, Carl? I mean, but it's harder than ever now to build and maintain a corporate culture when you've got remote workforce spread out so geographically diverse there. What are the elements of the people strategy at WSRB, and how does it work in practice?
Excellent. Yeah, it starts really with establishing strong values, shared values, and a compelling vision and mission. This is, kind of best practice stuff for companies. And a lot of companies that I've worked with, they do this as an annual exercise and they put it in a drawer. They got the posters on the walls. It's really got to be lived. You've got to live it. It's, one of my mentors, Scott Fay, likes to say, what's on the walls and what's in the halls needs to match. And so it's got to be something that's lived and talked about and brought into your daily, your weekly, your monthly meetings. In addition, though, I really think you've got to invest in technology to enable your team that's, as I mentioned earlier, both on Zoom and in the room. You've got to enable that team to have an effective experience, especially if you're in a hybrid environment. But even if you're not, you need the technology that gives you the ability to have a quality experience in the meetings you have. The other thing we did is we established a regular cadence of in-person meetings as soon as we possibly could. And that was probably late 2020, alongside even more frequent Zoom and Teams meetings. So we've got all team meetings we did quarterly prior to this. We established a strong culture using that as one of the tools, but we changed that to monthly. Now those are monthly, and we still do the quarterly in person, but we do monthly virtual meetings. Business units meet monthly in person. You've got monthly one-to-one performance reviews. Our executives meet weekly. I meet with each of the executives personally each week. Our leadership team meets weekly on Zoom, monthly in the room. And then we have what I fondly call conversations with Carl, where now that we're out of the office, I'm not bumping into people. So 4 to 5 of our team members per month, I meet with them and I ask them 5 pretty simple questions. What are we doing well? What can we do better? what's one change I could make that would make things more excellent, more effective, more effective or more efficient around here. And then what sticks, what creates friction in your work. And it revealed a whole ton of opportunities for us to improve this whole virtual and hybrid environment for us.
Listening to Carl, a couple of things that come to mind is this whole idea of building culture, but using the tools that are now available to us. And I think it's a great opportunity, a time for us to come out of the COVID world and be thinking about how can we make a lot of the processes and procedures we had in place pre-COVID, just how to reinvent them, how to think about them and make them better, not just replace them, but just improve stuff. Right. So the one-to-one calls that Carl talked about, we do that. Ours aren't just performance reviews. They're the kind of calls that take place that might have taken place at the water cooler. What do you this weekend? What's going on in your life? What are your hobbies? That kind of stuff. So we really work at doing that as well with the people. And those are the kind of things that do build culture. And I think most of us now feel more comfortable doing video. And so we suggest that company managers do videos welcoming new employees, talking about their company and their company culture, and doing those kinds of things that will help people understand before they even start a job, perhaps, what to expect, what they're going to be faced with, what this company is like. And I think those are all things we can do today that maybe we didn't do such a good job with pre-COVID.
Yeah, and adding to that too, we do a virtual coffee break every day at 9 a.m. Not mandatory. Anyone who wants to come, there's regular attendees who drop in. Again, doing as Rick is saying, finding ways not necessarily to replicate, but in some ways replace the tools and environment that we had when we could just bump into people. But it really is about relationships. Some of the time you'll run into a leader who says, hey, all these meetings are getting in the way of my job. And my answer to that is the people are your job. That's your first job. The other steps got to get done, but the people are a leader's first job. And that means that these kinds of touch points are essential if you want to have a healthy culture.
Yeah, but clearly in a hybrid world too, though, you do have that challenge. You've got some people in the office and some people, at home or somewhere. And so you mentioned technology. It's important for a company at that point to make sure they've got the right technology to be able to include everybody, the in-person and the people that are remote in a meeting, for example. And you mentioned the virtual coffee break. We actually do a virtual fitness class a few times a week, and whoever wants to show up does that. So there's just so many cool things that we can do in this world, in this environment.
Yeah, we've AAIS has a culture club. Shout out to them. They it's nothing to do with Boy George there, but they sponsored things like step competitions, which can be managed across geographies, right? I mean, with technology, use technology to, you're right. It's a way to connect people across the divide, and it works really well, I have to say. Rick, a marketing guy, I'm a marketing guy, we know how important culture is to brand identity. You've seen a lot of companies out there. Any lessons that you picked up from companies about the way they've managed their cultures and exposed them to the outside world as this is the place you want to work for as well as with?
I think some of the things, maybe just to highlight that we've already touched on. I think the companies that are out there that are doing a good job with this probably were doing a really good job pre-COVID as well. But like I mentioned, it now gives everybody a new opportunity to go back and rethink what they've been doing and what's important to them. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are doing are being a little more inclusive in terms of inviting their employees to talk about this stuff, not just coming down from top down, but to involve everybody in the discussion. What's valuable, what's important, this whole work-life balance kind of stuff. The fun things that we're talking about, that'll hit social media, it'll hit other things where people go, oh, wow, this looks like a really fun company to be working for. And so I think it just becomes, culture becomes part of your culture. You're actually doing what you're doing it. And I think that's what I see anyway,
Yeah, I think one thing we want to get to is, it sounds like fun. Culture should be, it should make the work environment, enjoyable, let's say, but it also has to be productive.
but also value. Yes, of course.
So, and Carl, I know you've been managing, this in this distributed workforce now for a while, and you've talked about organizational effectiveness. Tell us a bit more about that. How do you keep your remote workers happy, motivated, and like I said, productive?
Yeah, we touched on a little bit of that at the beginning, where we talk about hiring motivated, positive people, of course, and then giving them clear goals, removing obstacles, making sure they have the tools they need, rewarding performance. All of that's a part of it. But when you look at organizational effectiveness, you're really, as Rick touched on, you're talking about culture. And I find sometimes it interesting that some leaders look at these as what they call soft skills. When you call something soft skills, it sounds like it's not that valuable. So we rebranded that. You guys are marketing guys, you'll appreciate this. We're not calling them foundational skills. We now call them essential skills. The ability to deal with people is the biggest indicator of a person's ability to succeed and grow in their career and be effective in a work environment. And so companies that neglect building their people are companies that are not as effective as they could be. And so the work we do, I talked about the all team meetings. We have 4 things that we cover that we make sure every all team meeting has, and they happen to form an acronym that worked out for us. But we're working on team building, awareness, skills, and culture, strengthening our culture. And so every team meeting has that component in it. So we're working on building the whole person. A better person at work will become a better person outside of work. And our team members say that to me all the time. I so appreciate that you guys give us these people skills, that such as disc evaluations, things like that, where we can now be better in our personal lives. So when you look at organizational effectiveness, these kinds of practices that we put in place for quite a few years ago can be measured, it turns out. And so we focused on the things I'm going to talk about next, very specifically and on purpose, every one of these things for the last 7 years of my tenure. And we found out 2 years ago, you can actually measure it. There's an evaluation. It's an anonymous all-employee survey called the Organizational Effectiveness Survey, developed by a PhD, Dr. Cappy Leland, and validated by 2 university studies. It covers things, it covers people practices and results practices. So it measures leadership, things like, is the leadership achievement driven? Are they trustworthy? Are they ethical? Do they develop people? There's people elements. Do people have clear roles and responsibilities? Do they have skills and talent development in your workplace? Is the teamwork and collaboration positive? And then in the effective practices section of it, you're looking at does the company have an inspirational purpose or mission? Do they communicate future vision? There's a lot of these kinds of things. I'll show you a chart here in a second with all of these on it, but I wanted to hit a couple of tops of the waves, if you will, as we're going into this. And then the performance metrics. Does the people, essentially what you're talking about, does this company value people and get results? Because a lot of times companies feel like if I focus too much on and push too hard for results, I'm going to lose people. But if I treat people too well, they're going to goof off. But we found you can do both. And so there's a slide I want to show you here that gives, first off, it's a sample result. This is what a typical organization would see. So you see down the left side, a whole lot more of those characteristics that I was talking about briefly. But you see those relational behaviors at the top. You've got the effectiveness practices at the bottom. And a typical company is going to see a scatter chart somewhat like this, where you're good in areas and not so good in others. And then there's a second chart that you get as part of this study on this next slide that I want to show you. And this is a different way of looking at the immune system. It's measuring the same factors: leadership, people, performance, and strategy. And so you'll see kind of a scatter like that. So when we found out we could do this as a study and actually measure the results of all these things we focused on for 7 years, we were surprised to find here in the next slide the results that we achieved. And according to Dr. Leland, anything 4.5 and above is considered excellent. And we were very pleasantly surprised. And what we found very interesting is that this is the full organization that you're looking at here. Those numbers go much further into the green with the team members that we've hired during COVID, who've only experienced this organization as a virtual company. And when we asked Dr. Leland, because that was not expected, we asked him, hey, what is that? He said, sometimes you got to see the darkness to recognize the light. And he's basically saying that these people that are joining our team, these team members, are coming from organizations that don't focus on these things, that don't value these things. And that last slide I'll show you real quick. It's just as you would expect from what you just saw, people, leadership, strategy, and performance, all hitting very well into the green on these. The thing Dr. Leland emphasized, though, is he said, as an organization, he was addressing our board and our executive team, you got to keep doing what you did to get here, because when you stop, these numbers will slide. And so if you have an interest in learning more about this evaluation, full disclosure, there is zero financial benefit to me or my organization from this evaluation. But if you want to find out how to get that, I would be glad to share that with you. It's proven to be extremely valuable to us as an organization to know, for one, as a 501c6, that salaries are lowest. It's still 4.5. But as we talked about earlier, there's a dollar value to a positive work environment for people. It varies by person, no question. But wanted to share that with you because that's kind of an exciting endorsement that the things that John and Rick and I are talking with you about today, they work and they make a difference.
Yeah, well, it definitely has to start with the top. I mean, we've talked a lot about how it works within, but there has to be an appreciation of, at the management level that these things are important, because they will fall on deaf ears if you don't start, walk the talk. And I think that's the old phrase for a lot of the things we've been talking about now, but it's still true. The leaders of the organization set the tone. And if it's important to them and they have consistency around that message, then I think you start to get culture. If they aren't, then you won't. And Rick, as you said before, it really is. It's all about good, solid, regular, consistent communication, right?
Oh, communication. We haven't talked. Perhaps, I mean, I guess it's what we haven't said in a way, but it's been part of everything we've said. Communication is critical. In particular, and again, I think it's another great example of how in this new work environment, there's a new layer of complexity and responsibility for management teams at whatever firm you're part of, and that is to make sure that you're communicating clearly and consistently and with focus and intent for the people that are in the office, but also then the people that are outside the office. And failing to do that, it all falls apart. You've got a real mess on your hands. And so, and that is a challenge sometimes. Like I said, if you're having a certain an ad hoc meeting with some people that are in the office, who are you leaving out that might not be in that day? That should really be part of that conversation, and you have to make sure that you include them that way. So communication is at all levels, and we've kind of talked about that in different ways of doing it. But whether it's having these different one-to-one meetings, to having the monthly meetings, the weekly meetings, to making sure managers are reaching out to the people that are off on a particular day and checking in with them, because it's real easy. You get real busy, and it's real easy not to do that. So it's that kind of communication that becomes probably in today's world more important than ever. And again, an important part of culture.
Absolutely. Well, we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to make sure that we get some questions from our audience there. I'd like to remind them to use the Q&A submission box there at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit any questions for the panel. And, I got one to kick us off, I guess. We talked a little bit about the tools, but not specifically, and there might be some new ones there. Aside from video conferencing apps that we're very familiar with, and we're using them right now, are there any other tools you found that can help manage projects and workflows in a remote environment? Carl, how about you?
Well,
Rick, if you either one.
Go ahead. Well, clearly we're using Zoom here, and you mentioned that, but I think a lot of the application bundles, like let's say Microsoft or Google, now have these whole series of tools to manage in these kind of environments. So, for example, our team uses Microsoft Teams, and it's just invaluable. All the components of that become so important in being able to manage in a hybrid work environment. it works. It works in a totally in-person environment. It works in a totally virtual environment, and it's just perfect for that hybrid work environment as well. So I would say that's an example of the kind of things that the company should really be paying attention to. And I think most are. Whether they're taking full advantage of them or not, I don't know, but the tools are available for sure.
Well, how about you? How do you guys manage projects across the geography there?
There are a number of excellent tools out there. We have a really robust software development team, for example. We use a virtual whiteboard program called Miro. And that's one of the things you can lose if just the ability to gather around a whiteboard and just pencil things out. So it's important to have a tool like that. And it has the ability to put Post-it notes up and people can contribute live. And so people are putting Post-it notes on the whiteboard as the discussion's happening. And so that's one tool. Teams, of course, Zoom, these are really, really critical. But there are also some good project management tools in the Microsoft 365 suite that we use also. So we're able to track projects. We also, one thing we do that's really important, we didn't touch on for a virtual team, we've had this for 7 years, but metrics for team members. People worry about whether or not their team members are being productive. Develop meaningful, useful metrics. Don't check boxes. That frustrates your team. Develop meaningful metrics and keep track. And when they're getting that work done, it shows. If you're just kind of hoping, that's not really a good strategy. But if you have metrics for each team member, and then the leader's metrics are their team members' success within their metrics, that works really, really well.
Yeah,
another an adjunct. I'm sorry, John.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
An adjunct to this, I think when because we were talking about attracting, winning the war on talent and doing that, and I think what we're finding a lot of companies doing more than they probably were doing before is using social media to find new employees and going out to non-traditional methods to find talent and to find skills. So you're looking at LinkedIn and Indeed and Glassdoor and even companies like WAHVE who are out there doing things differently to help companies find the talent that they need. So another example of how we're shifting.
Yeah, we at AAIS we've used quite a few tools. I would say we do use a whiteboard. We use Lucid charts there, but we're an agile organization, so we use for project management we use Rally, which is a great software package. We also, I would say, we do big room planning, which is a way for the entire organization to come together 4 times a year. And we go over everything that's going on. Everyone gets to talk about their projects, how it's going to impact the other areas. And so the organization really comes together around the strategy and the implementation. So it's unique for me to do something like that, and it was terrific, and it works very well here at AAIS. We do have a question. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say, and you just reminded me of something too, because we're a completely virtual company as well. We have 2 retreats a year that we take. The whole company comes in, meet in person. Part of it is working on business issues, and part of it is team building stuff. And one of the things that we do with the team building traditionally is we work on something where, for example, one time we went and built bicycles and gave them to a charity. Doing that kind of stuff, the employees really respond positively to. Just an example.
Yeah. Well, and adding to that too, Rick, I've talked to CEOs for insurance companies that we work with, and they say we're having trouble getting people to come to an in-person meeting. And so I described what we do, and he goes, "Oh, you're creating an event." And I said, "Yeah, you got to create something." Yeah. That's what you're describing. So we do a morning of training, feed everybody a good lunch. We don't go on the cheap on that, and then we do a fun activity together, and that's a team building activity. That's easy to do. We were paying $27,000 a month in rent, and now that we're virtual, we're reallocating a small portion of that to these kinds of things. For example, and if I have team members watching this webinar, which I probably do, we're gonna take the whole team out in electric boats on Lake Union at our June meeting, and we're going to. There's a GPS scavenger hunt, so we got 10 boats competing with each other and you got to drive to a spot in the lake, then you got to answer a Seattle-based trivia question. And then
Right.
But that's just one example. We've taken people to Star Wars openings. We try to do things more interactive than that, where you got the fine dining cooking class, where then you do a debrief after. What did you learn here? Along with learning how to chop shallots and not chop your fingers off. Those kinds of things. We create an event, and we do that quarterly. You guys do that annually, semi-annually, and the cadence needs to be certainly what the company needs, but create something people want to come to, for God's sakes. We have people that rearrange vacations because they do not want to miss the all-team meeting.
Right.
That's what you want. Something you would talk about. How do you get people to come back? Make something worth coming back to.
Well, it's interesting you say we do have 2 events a year, a company picnic in the summer. We used to have, it was around the holidays, but this year I think we're doing something in the fall, around autumn. And that later event is we invite significant others. So it's engaging not beyond the employee to their families, get them involved. And again, you go back to it's work-life balance. If you feel like the company cares, then you feel like you're a little bit more loyal to them. In fact, we have a question here, which I find almost very interesting to get your take on this. It's about work-life balance. Means different things to different people. How can you determine something that works best? This is the part that was interesting. And what do you think about the CEO who said recently, never hire people who want work-life balance? I would think that's almost everybody, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you guys think?
I don't know who the CEO was, but I think it's wrong. I think, to be sensitive to what went on with so many people during the pandemic, they lost family members. Maybe they've got long-term COVID stuff. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that happened. And it's important to realize that a lot of people were had a significant impact on their life as a result of that. And so many people did reevaluate what was important to them. And yes, work is still very important, and they still can be very productive, very important and valuable team members. But it's not the kind of we don't want to be in that situation now where we forget the life part of our lives.
Yeah. I did. There's one question that I guess it dovetails a little bit. Are there any old school management methods or expectations that just don't apply anymore to motivate the new gen professional?
Wow.
I would say the concept, and it ties into what we were just talking about, the concept that work is your first priority in your life, no matter what. You'll do whatever you need to do. We obviously want extra milers on our teams. When there's a project deadline, we want people willing to put in that extra effort, no question. And the work's got to get done. But I even say this to our team members: you work to provide for other goals in your life. You want to be able to pay your mortgage, have good food to eat, buy a car when you need it. You want to be able to go on vacation. You're funding the rest of your life with work. And so your life and your family needs to come first, which is very interesting because some people interpret that my son's baseball game is at 3:00 on Friday and we have a planning meeting. I'm going to skip that meeting. No, that's not what that would mean, unless that's get exceptions to those kinds of things. It's the championship game. Sure, we'll give exceptions for that. But the idea that, when something happens in your life, your mother is suddenly in the hospital and you have a planning meeting, we want you at the hospital. And we tell them that, do not come in remotely. Well, I want to come in, only come in remotely once you're confident everything is fine there, but we do not expect you here. We prefer that you not be here. We want you with your mother. When we take those kinds of approaches to when people feel that you care about them, it's a whole lot easier for them to feel that if you actually do, quite frankly, right? You start with really caring about and valuing people, that shows. And that kind of just naturally flows through the decisions that you make then.
Yeah.
Well, and to build on that, so WAHVE has really placed literally thousands of professionals with insurance firms everywhere in the country. And we've been doing that, like I mentioned, for 13 years. And our experience before COVID was that those people, because we get a lot of responses back and we do surveys, those people become valued team members who are as productive as the in-person, the in-office people. And so I think there's just no question that that can and does work. So I think you want people to be sensitive to that and pay attention to it. And what the employee's looking for when we say work-life balance is freedom and flexibility. You know, John, I think at the very beginning, you mentioned people are working more. Well, that's something you have to be actually guard against because you get burnout. You get people that start in the morning and don't. But the point being is that a lot of people that are working on that hybrid work environment can start working a little bit earlier, work a little bit later. Yes, they have to be there when the team has to meet, or whether if it's a customer need, they have to be there for that, a client need. But on the other hand, it gives them that freedom and flexibility that it reduces all of the anxiety and stress if they have a doctor's appointment or whatever. They can just go off and do that, not having to worry that it's going to create all kinds of chaos.
Well, it comes back to the work is a means to an end, right? Your end is usually something outside of work. Maybe that's something that's changed since I started, but also it is demonstrative of the values of the organization, right? I mean, if the values match the values of the employee, then you stay. There's loyalty. If you're out of sync, we get an exodus, right? So
culture.
Yeah. One last question here, because this is beside DISC, what other tools, programs, or books have you used to help your people develop people skills?
That's an excellent question. We actually do a mastermind studies, what we call it, with our leadership team every week. We go through a book. We've done Simon Sinek's Infinite Game. We've done the 21 Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. We've done Sense and Respond, which is an Agile for the whole organization book. I could go on. We've done, a shelf full of books. In fact, they're actually back here behind me, right there. We've studied all those books together. We also have a book club for the team, where they have the ability to study these books along with us. And so those tools, actual books, and in addition to that, I mentioned DISC. We use one called Behavior Styles. It's out of Seattle. But those evaluations, not Simon Sinek, Patrick Lencioni has come out with a new tool called Working Genius that I highly recommend. Behavior styles are just how we communicate with one another effectively. Working Genius is how we can work together more effectively. And so they really build on each other. We try not to do flavor of the month. We've done also some work with emotional intelligence, but I've worked for organizations where it's, hey, we're doing this, we're doing this. And so we try to do things, tools and resources that build on this idea of how do we become more effective as human beings? How do we become more effective as people, and our ability to relate to others, to resolve conflicts, to communicate effectively. So we provide those types of tools. So we start with the behavior styles for the new employees. I teach that class. We do refreshers on it. And now we're going to be adding the Working Genius to it, not because it's something new, but because it's unified with the other things that we're teaching. So it's part of the toolbox then, if you will.
That's great. Rick, any suggestions there, resources for today's manager?
I don't know about resources. A lot of the best practices that we've talked about that Carl just went over are the same. I mean, we've done a lot of those things as well. So I think and you have too, John, in with AAIS and the things that we're talking about. I think you've got 3 companies here that have been dealing with virtual environments and hybrid and virtual employees, and we've covered a lot of really good practices that help that. I think the fact that you're on video all the time, camera on all the time when you're talking to people, you're practicing those the skills that so you don't have to just read about them, you're actually doing it. One of the things we do, for example, at our at our all team meetings that we have, is that we have at the end, after people go through all of their, the reports and the issues that they're dealing with, we have something at the end called Wavy Gravy, and people just share whatever they want to share. So vacation photos, pictures of their dogs, their hobbies, whatever. Just earlier this week, one of the people on our team went to a class and built a guitar. He's a musician and he built his own guitar. It was so cool just to see that. And so what happens is you are now really learning in a way that we didn't do when we were all in person, because we've all had those jobs, about your team members that you just learn more than you knew before. And I think those are people skills. You're getting better at it
That's the
by
new
doing it.
One
It's
thing,
doing.
one thing to
Yeah.
add to that real quick is when you talked about the all team meetings, Rick, that reminded me a version of what you were talking about. We do shout outs. Basically, we start the meeting with team members, hey, catch somebody doing something right. So shout out, well, we have Ted, who's in our tech division. He stayed late to help me get my computer fixed. I had a presentation the next day. And, when it's virtual, you can do the clap this, right? So we have that, but we also have open Q&A. And I think that's important as leaders to be thinking about. We try to be a very transparent organization. And I just tell the team, ask whatever you want, be respectful, have reasons, but ask whatever you want. And if it's confidential, we'll label it as such, but there's not much that's confidential. And so open Q&A, because here, when I first started doing that, I had some more senior leaders say, whoa, you may not like what you hear. I might not, but don't we need to know? We need to know what they're thinking. We know what they're concerned about. And when you have that kind of transparency and people can ask, well, why the heck are we hiring all these new developers? They're wondering, let's help them understand that. Understanding the what and why of what we do is so powerful, because the more people understand, the whole, you've heard this, the whole concept, well, that's not part of your job, or that's above your pay grade. We don't say stuff like that. They'll tell you, because some of the best ideas that you get are from a person who knows nothing about what you're doing, who asks a genuinely curious question. You go, oh my gosh. And so we do a lot of the open Q&A at these all team meetings as well. Plus, anytime anybody wants to ask, they're always invited. Hey, this isn't your only chance to ask. Hit me up on email or on Teams if you have any questions whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big key to helping have this interaction in a virtual environment. We did that before virtual. I guess what I would say too is that people are looking at virtual and hybrid as being different. Tools are different, but the people are the same. And it's still all about relationships. It's still all about communication. It's still all about rallying around shared values and working hard together to do something cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what you get at there is that we're unearthing some value from people who may have been quiet if they were in a room with people who didn't share those values, and you didn't have an open environment. If you welcome contributions like that, you get more out of everyone, and they feel like they're contributing more as well. So I think we're entering a really interesting and hopefully even a more productive way of working. But I think there's still companies out there that are still trying to figure it out, and hopefully they've learned something from today. I think this was a great session. I learned something. Hopefully the audience did too. I really appreciate Rick, Carl, you guys joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been every time I talk with you guys, I learned something. So it's all good.